Hey guys, so you are trying to move to Houston, Texas, but you're trying to figure out like what do I have to do to move? How do I sell my house? What's the process for moving? Well, I'm Shadria Patton and I am going to bring on Jennifer Bell of Pillar to Post Inspectors so that she can tell you guys about the inspection process, the pre-listing, for how you buy older homes, new construction, all of that. So hey Jennifer.
Hi, how are you? I am so glad for you to have me on. This is really exciting for me and my small little team. This is the first time we've ever done something like this. So thank you so much.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're here. So let's start the process with pre-listing inspection. So for sellers, a lot of times they just throw their home on the market, but I always recommend to mine that, hey, maybe you should get an inspector out there to, kind of that way what other buyers are going to see once they start going through their inspection process. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so there's several different ways you can approach this. So Pillar to Post Home Inspectors, we have a seasonal maintenance checklist, both for the spring and the fall. And you can use that checklist and not even ever talk to an inspector, whoever you choose to use as an inspector, and go through that and actually at a very high level prepare your home. So simple things like around sealant on the exterior windows, sealant around maybe on the exterior walls where things such as like the faucet and the hose bib is coming out, things that you may have hung up, just very basic things, general maintenance and servicing. One of the things that I always tell agents too, or tell their sellers, is that any kind of paperwork that you may have as far as the last time you did a winter servicing on your HVAC system or a thermo servicing on so just all the records you could possibly have, plus like your just maintenance checklist will be a great way to get you started. Now, if you actually decide to bring an inspector in, an inspector in the Texas under the Texas Real Estate Commission cannot just do a partial inspection. So legally, you really can't bring in an inspector and say, hey, just look at the foundation and tell me how it goes. TREC, Texas Real Estate Commission, actually wants you to do several portions. So there's certain things that you can eliminate. So things like the appliances, if you don't want to do the microwave and the dishwasher in the oven. But TREC does require you to go in and actually do very specific things, even if it's a partial inspection or a pre-listing inspection. And so some of the big things that we find in pre-listing inspections is, again, foundations and structures. So things like having your yard maintained and making sure that you don't have any what I call conducive conditions for pest entrance, whether it be squirrels, rats, holes. You would be amazed as far as like how small of a hole a rat or something like that can get into, let alone wood destroying insects. And so I'm going to stop here because I could probably go on for about 2 hours on pre-listing inspections. But I think it's important to know that you can eliminate some things, but some things you actually have to do if you're legally calling in an inspector to say, hey, I actually want this that's, under the TREC guidelines.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And so, folks, when she's saying the TREC guidelines, that is the Texas Real Estate Commission. That basically that's the organization that certifies or designates home inspectors. Is that correct, Jennifer? Am I saying that correctly? Okay.
Yes,
awesome. Awesome. So they have like certain guidelines that they have to follow. That's also the same commission that provides real estate agents their license as well. So you talked about the most common issues when you were talking about like foundation and structure. The other thing, how can sellers actually prepare their home for you to come in as an inspector? What should they do?
So we have inspected homes, luxury homes, $1 million plus, historical homes that were 100 years old. And so one of the things that I can say, so whether you have a 100-year-old house and you just got some oddities to the house, one of the things I absolutely love is just a list of things, like simple things, how to turn things off and on, where switches are. So in a lot of luxury homes, you find high-end appliances, and there's certain things that you have to do to turn them on. So most times, if there's not a list, I actually will go to YouTube and look up the appliance. And so a lot of this is with the ovens, with the I think it's the conduction ovens. I'm probably not saying this right, but you actually have to have a pot on top of it. If you think of the electrical stoves or just the gas stoves or cooktops, you just turn those on and you can see. But with some of these newer high-end energy efficient appliances, you actually have to have the pot or the skillet or whatever on it for it to actually operate. So there's just little things that are always nice. Also, particularly with pool and spa. So a lot of things are actually now done on an app. And so sometimes the inspector will come in and actually cannot turn on the pump or cannot turn on the heat because it's locked on the seller's app. So any information you can give the seller, also with the heating and the cooling. I can't tell you how many times we've gone into a home and we can't adjust the thermostat because it's locked. And the seller may be on vacation or out of state or just out of touch. And so there's things that we have to come back and do because of things such as that. So I'm not really sure that answered your question, but I thought I would share that those are some little things that, as much as possible, either leaving instructions or basically having everything available for the inspector to operate and turn off and on is great.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a good tip. That's honestly something I've never even thought of. I've never even seen that, so that's actually a good idea. So, okay, then. So let's move on. We talked about for sellers. Let's move over to the buyer side. Most of my clients do purchase new construction. However, this last year, I did have more buyers that were interested in older homes because they they don't want the cookie cutter home. They want more square footage. So with the older home, are there any unique challenges when you're expecting older homes?
Yes, so I actually have a couple of pictures I would like to show you. But before I share with you those pictures, one of the things that we always find is we get feedback. Sometimes the seller is actually there, or sometimes we get feedback from the agent. But from the older homes, a lot of people do remodeling. And in the state of Texas, and I don't know all the details, but in the state of Texas, basically anyone can come in and be a general contractor. But depending on what city you live in, depends on what code you're going to have to do. So any kind of remodel really has to go through the city for a permit, even with roofing. So almost 9 times out of 10, roofers don't get permits from the city of Houston. Now, the city of Houston may actually tell you, hey, we know it may take weeks. And the city of Houston doesn't have time to run around every single neighborhood actually seeing who has a permit for a roof. But whether it's a new roof or a new plumbing system, new gas system, some people want to install outdoor kitchens with gas systems. There are very specific things that, regardless if you're in Houston, Fort Worth, Austin, Lubbock, El Paso, every city has a code year that they run by and permits that need to be pulled for remodeling. And so that's really important to know. Did you have a question for me? Because I was going to finish another thought.
Well, no, that was crazy because I literally just I knew that if you added an extra room, yeah, you got to get a permit for it. But I didn't know just adding the outside barbecue area and, things like that. I didn't know that required a permit. So that's good to know because I have had clients that have bought older home and they're fixing it up. And I'm always telling them, just talk to the HOA. But I need to be telling them, make sure that your contractor gets a permit for this because there's more involved than I realized.
I do not represent the city of Houston, so full disclaimer. But if you actually look at the code, and like I said, the city of Houston, there's no way that they can run around looking at 4 million homes, making sure that everyone's got the permit pool, and it takes a long time. So it's one of these things where it's hit or miss, but you can get in trouble if you don't have the permit. And so one of the other things I wanted to share with you is the workmanship. So I always use my father when I talk about this in inspections. My father is the greatest handyman in the world. He grew up on a farm. He can MacGyver or stick together anything, with duct tape and a piece of bubble gum. But going back to code and even an inspector, because something that's important to know, Texas inspectors are not code inspectors, and that's a whole nother probably conversation. But we actually inspect to the Texas Real Estate Commission, not to the International Residential Code. But regardless, we're going to come in and we're going to see things that the handyman or the contractor did that won't be up to the Texas Real Estate Commission standards of operation or code. And so people will say, well, we just had this, we spent $30,000 remodeling this house, and now you're telling me there's all these things wrong with it. And I'm like, look, my dad could have come in here and done just as good as job, but my dad is not going to do any kind of handyman work based on Texas Real Estate Commission. I said, but he's a great handyman. So I think it's really important for people to understand that if they're remodeling and planning on selling, or just to know that there are certain things that just good engineering and construction, you probably want to look at basically the standards of practice for the Texas Real Estate Commission or the International Residential Code, and make sure that whoever's doing that understands those regulations.
Awesome. I know you mentioned there were some things you wanted to show. Was that
show you some extreme pictures? They're what I call poor workmanship type of issues, but there's a couple of photos that I did want to share. So let me go ahead and get my screen set up. Okay, let me know. Are you able to see my screen?
Let's go right here. There we go.
Okay. So hopefully you can see this. This is a water heater in an attic, and I'm going to try to zoom in.
Yeah, let's make it as big as possible.
Okay. So with the water heater, you actually have two areas for pressure and temperature release. And basically that means if the water heater is getting overheated, it will actually it's got a primary release, which is circled here, and then basically like an emergency release, which is on top. Now, I'm not really sure if you can tell because there's multiple things going wrong with this home. But when you have a new water heater installed by a handyman, or that's someone that is not a certified or licensed plumber, the pan is here. If you look, any water that releases actually flows over into the attic. It doesn't even go into the pan. So does that make sense there?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then in addition to that, you see all this insulation. This pan is filled with insulation. So just like anything, if water fills up into this pan and insulation is actually clogging where things should be released, then basically there is no drainage. It will also overflow. So something as simple as installing a brand new water heater in an older home, whether you do it yourself, there's certain attention to detail that a licensed plumber is going to take care of. And so things like insulation left in the drain pan and the release actually going over the drain pan is absolutely not acceptable and can actually cause major damage to a home. Let me pull up one more.
And what is when you said the major damage, what's the worst that could happen?
Oh, well, the entire attic can have water in it, and then it actually goes through the ceiling and destroys, structural damage. No, but once you actually have water in the house, then you're looking at things such as mold and other microbial growth if it's not dried out and cleaned out properly.
Got it. So if that came up on a buyer's inspection report, should they be asking someone just to, change out the water heater, or you think the pan, or I guess talk to a plumber and see what they say?
So as an inspector, we can't make hardcore recommendations. All we can really do is maybe kind of identify some areas of what may be the root cause of the problem. But any good inspector will almost always say either talk to a qualified contractor or talk to a licensed plumber or a licensed electrician. If an inspector maybe verbally will kind of give you some ideas and some options, but in the report, an inspector should never, unless that inspector is a licensed plumber, and even then, that's a completely different report. An inspector should never be prescriptive on exactly what should be done.
Okay, thank you.
Now, something else I want to show you here. This is a home that we just inspected in the last week or so. Now, you can't see the outside of the roof. Yes, of course. This home was built in the 70s. A new roof was put on in March of this year. But what they failed to do, several things. So I don't know if you can tell, but this is actually water damage. And I'm inside the attic looking at this. You probably can't tell, but this is one of the exhaust vents for the heating, the furnace system. But here there was a lot of water damage. So while there is a brand new roof, you can actually see water damaging from the actual sheathing and structures throughout the internal portion of the attic. And so what this does, if it's in a small localized area, there's probably, again, a qualified contractor or a carpenter may say, oh, well, we're going to put some paint on it, or we're going to put some sealant on it, and it'll actually maintain the strength and the structural integrity. But if something like this is throughout, I mean, just anything that is broken or frayed, if you think about how heavy your roof is, then you actually potentially can have what we call bowling or caving in on the roof. So a lot of things that people will do with older homes, so whether they're, again, they just bought the house and they're remodeling or want to upgrade, or they're preparing to sell, is that they kind of piecemeal some of the remodeling, but you have to look at the entire system and how that may actually impact the entire system. One other thing I want to show you with the roof, and I know we're running out of time here, but a lot of people tend to actually put 2 layers of roofing on. And so I think that I had this set up. I don't see it on here. So unfortunately, I don't have the picture ready. But basically what I want to explain is that particularly with older homes, a lot of times they're only designed to hold the weight of one roof. Oftentimes what we'll see is 2 roofs being put on. So instead of having the roof completely taken off and starting off with a brand new roof, what they'll do is they'll just add it on to the existing roof. So this actually adds on weight to the house and the structure. And the structure may not have been designed to hold all that weight. And then it even gets more complicated. So, here in the Gulf Coast area, we have windstorm events, primarily with hurricanes. When you start having wind gusts, 60, 70, 80, 100 miles an hour, that's already putting basically a stress on your structure anyway. And then when you've got all these additional loads. And so I'm giving you the extreme cases. I don't want to alarm anyone, but I'm giving you some of the extreme cases and some things that we've seen that ultimately can cause damage if things aren't done correctly.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good to know. That's what we want to know. A lot of times people want to know worst case scenario, what could happen, So that was great for older homes. Now, I know you're short on time, so let's talk very quickly about new construction homes. So basically, is it necessary to even inspect it? What are some of the major red flags? And then how do you assess the workmanship of the builder, or whatever you want to talk about? Just give the people something about new construction inspections.
Sure. So I'll give you 2 quick things on new construction, which I try to always emphasize. This is not because it's a horrible builder or anything such as that. So one, back to roofing. Whenever you install a new roof, whether your house is 100 years old and you got the new roof, or your house was built recently and it's a new roof, there is basically something called uplift on a roof. So most roof with asphalt shingles basically are initiated with nails, and then there's adhesive. So just because of the temperature changes, because often here in Houston, it'll be 80 degrees, and then 2 days later, it'll be 30 degrees. So I told people, think about a Band-Aid. If a Band-Aid goes through like extreme environmental things, it loses its stickiness on wherever your cut is. And the same thing with the roof. So what ends up happening is that those tabs, I don't know if you can see, but they kind of lay over each other and they kind of uplift. And this is just very normal. So what happened back 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, when it took 2 years to build a house and the actual builder was there on site with the construction workers, this was something that they would actually go in and make sure before closing the house that all those tabs were actually down and taken care of. So we actually see a lot of uplift on new construction homes. And again, it's not because it's a horrible builder or because the roof was installed incorrectly. It's just something that naturally happens just because of the adhesiveness, the temperature differences, and just it also could be a little bit because of workmanship. And so I think it's important for people to know that and look out for that. And that's something I know a lot of people choose not to have an inspector on a new construction home, but that's something that anyone can see in the driveway. I mean, you don't need a drone or a ladder. You can see it throughout on all sides of the house, in the lower levels and the upper levels. The other thing that is also common with the foundation is something called corner popping. And so what I try to explain, something that I did not share with anyone, but I have been fortunate enough to teach engineering technology classes at Houston Community College. And I've been teaching there for over 10 years. And so things I'm trying to constantly emphasize to them about the workmanship and how things were done 50 years ago as compared to now is a foundation. Basically, it's various different materials, but it has water in it. The foundation is actually supposed to have water. Anything that you're mixing, cement or mortar, has moisture in it. The first couple of years, that moisture actually will evaporate. And so you've got curing time for when you place your foundation before you can actually start putting the structure on it. But then over 1, 2, 3 years, that foundation is still kind of figuring itself out in the soil. The moisture is coming out. Things are happening that are natural to that foundation. But at the end of the corners of the home, you will actually see cracks and what looks like frayed areas. And so these, again, are very common. So this may not be the best explanation, but I tell my students, think about a marshmallow, okay? And you've got a marshmallow, which is pretty good just structurally on its own, right? Then if you squish the marshmallow with your hand, things start kind of popping out on the sides, right? Okay, so again, it's a horrible explanation, but you have to realize when you're talking to students that have never even, this may be their first construction class, you got to get down to basics. And so what I tell them is that on those corners, that's actually, you have to go in and actually repair those. And they're very, very common. So any inspector you'll ask will say, yeah, we see corner pops a lot. And so I don't want the buyer to get alarmed. Oh my gosh, is there corner pop? Why didn't the builder fix this? It's just normal and natural. And sometimes just because of time and we're trying to just push out all these new construction homes, there's a lot of things that the builders used to do, like I said, 40, 50 years ago, because we were taking 2 years to build a new home instead of 6 or 9 months, that just kind of get overseen sometimes by the builder or the superintendent.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for your time. We appreciate you. I know I learned some new things. I'm pretty sure everyone here learned some new things as well. Guys, you see her name, her number, her email down there. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or you can connect with me and I will connect you with Jennifer. Jennifer, any last thoughts before you have to run for your next appointment?
No, thanks. I'm actually headed to a luncheon on commercial real estate. So I'll have to get back with you and let you know how that went, because we also do commercial inspections and just general consulting in buildings and building science as well. But just thank you so much for your time. I hope my answers weren't too long-winded. I tend to talk more like a professor sometimes when I kind of get into my groove and I get excited about this stuff. So thank you so much. We appreciate you and we love all your clients.
Oh, awesome. All right, folks. So again, if you are moving to Houston or trying to move around Houston, please make sure you reach out to me. Folks, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so that you can be notified about new videos on moving to Houston. Bye, y'all.